All right, ladies and gentlemen, why don't you grab your seats? We have our next speaker is about to begin. And of course, you can head to pollev.com/MAK at any time to submit your questions. So our next speaker, just come on in, grab yourself a seat. His name is Bill Barhydt. I actually mispronounced his name earlier. And what he's going to be talking about is the next wave of digital currency investing. So I'll give you a quick bio, and then I will bring him up. He's the founder and CEO of ABRA, the world's first non-bank digital currency wallet that can store money on the internet in any currency type and facilitate real-time exchange between currencies using blockchain technology. Very exciting, very cool. Bill has worked with many successful global companies over the years, including Netscape, Plaxo, Boom Financial, WebCentric, and Goldman Sachs. Sounds like you've got quite the pedigree. Why don't we welcome Mr. Bill Barhydt. Come on up here. There you go, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right.
All right, good morning. Soon to be good afternoon. Hope everybody's having fun, learning a lot. I know I have been. I want to talk to you a little bit about where I see digital currency technology going and why it's so powerful. Everybody talks about the price. I talk about the price. You talk about the price. It's great. Actually, the liquidity generated by the price movements helps us a lot, but for reasons that most people don't actually understand. So in that regard, I come bearing gifts. I want to put you in a position to go out into the world and explain to people why this is so important. People say, well, why should I care about Bitcoin? It's useless. All it is about price speculation. So I'm going to give you some tools that you can use to explain to people why this tech is so important. I know the slides have been flashing around. I'll post the slides on my Twitter feed, Bill Barhydt, and you can download them and memorize them and share them with your friends, and everybody in the world will become experts on why cryptocurrency technology is so important. Okay, so my day job is running this company ABRA, which is a digital currency wallet for buying, selling, storing various forms of digital currency. It's super unique in terms of how it works. You're actually storing the keys on the phone as opposed to on a server like with Coinbase and other services. And in addition, even the fiat currency is what we call non-custodial, which means there is no fiat currency in a bank. Sorry for the feedback. I'll come back to this because the way this works, in my opinion, is fundamental to how Bitcoin and the other crypto technologies are going to be used in the future. All right, so we'll come back to this. So I want to paint a picture for you about where this is going based upon what I've learned over the last 20 years. Okay, there's a quote here on your left, which is not positive about the future of cryptocurrencies in general. Now, what's interesting is I went through this before. You know, I worked on SSL back in my Netscape days, which all of you use when you type in HTTPS in a web browser. And in those days, a lot of people were, believe it or not, were very bearish on the internet itself. Right? It's useless. It's for porn and gambling, which sounds familiar. And this was actually a similar quote that I found, which was from the creator of Ethernet, of all people, predicting that the internet itself would go supernova within a few months of his quotes because it couldn't scale. And if any of you have been paying attention to Bitcoin, that sounds somewhat ironic as well. And obviously, the quote was wrong. I could basically interchange quotes that I'm seeing online from both my internet and Bitcoin days, and they more or less work interchangeably. Of course, these are the businesses that have gone supernova or bust as a result of the internet itself. And my prediction is that there's a whole bunch of other businesses that are going to be in a position to be completely disrupted based upon Bitcoin and Ether and other similar technologies in the coming years. All right. So we all know the Bitcoin market cap. Slide's a few days out of date. It's already gone up further. It's crazy what's going on, up and down, up and down. It's all good. But what really is the killer app? What is going to drive mainstream consumer adoption of Bitcoin? I want you to think about one thing when I get into these details of what these applications are. Right? A lot of Netflix users here, I'm guessing. Yeah, Netflix. Woohoo, right on. My hometown, Los Gatos, where they're based. So if you had to know, or your mother had to know, what a TCP/IP socket was to use Netflix, I'm guessing you wouldn't use Netflix. But the very first thing that happens when you start up your Netflix app is it makes this so-called TCP/IP socket connection to the internet. I'm going to posit to you that the same thing is going to be true of Bitcoin. Meaning, if you had to know what Bitcoin or Ether was in order to use it, you wouldn't be using it 5 years from now. But you will be. Meaning, it's going to be in the background in most cases. I'm going to show you how. There's 3 applications that we're excited about at ABRA for the future of Bitcoin. And I'm going to talk to you about each one in turn. The first one I want to talk about is what we call decentralized investing. Now, centralized investing is something that all of you do all the time. You go to a stock exchange online or a broker or buy anything through a marketplace. You're using some type of centralized investing model where a buyer and a seller are matched. Assets are usually held in custody, usually in escrow. And then there's some type of swap at settlement time. All of you know this. You do this every day. Decentralized investing is very different. Okay? Decentralized investing says, I want to bet that something's going to go up in price, and I marry that with somebody who believes that something's going to go down in price. We create what's called a smart contract, which is smart code out on the internet, which once it's out there can't be stopped. And at settlement time, somehow magically, who's ever in the money on the bet simply gets their funds. Now, this requires cryptocurrency to settle a smart contract, right? If you want it to be truly smart, meaning that it's done in a way that can't be stopped, there's no court adjudication required to mediate a settlement or things like that. Okay? So the advantage of this model are enormous, right? Instant settlement. You don't have to wait for any kind of settlement. Right? There's no barriers for short sellers because they don't have to borrow funds. Right? So no physical stock has to change hands. So if you're in Indonesia and you want to go long Apple stock, you can enter into a smart contract with somebody who believes in China that the price is going to go down. You both use a Bitcoin or Ether-based smart contract, and the winnings are automatically paid out. Okay? So ABRA uses this model to create digital currencies on the phone for fiat. So what I mean by that is when you're storing dollars on a phone with ABRA, you're not actually storing physical dollars in a bank. We use the underlying programmability of Bitcoin to create a synthetic dollar. Now, why would you want to do that? It's very easy to store dollars in a bank. Well, as soon as you do that, you have a single app that can work in 150 countries legally because there's no cash in the bank. And so the ABRA app is used in literally 150 countries today, and ABRA doesn't have to have any type of e-money or money transfer licensing because we're not holding consumer funds. So the power of this decentralized investing model is incredible, and it's not possible without the underlying cryptocurrency and its programmable nature. Okay? So, but the beauty is, again, back to my Netflix analogy, you use the app. It looks like a simple banking app, right? You don't know that there's this fancy Bitcoin multi-signature smart contract moving around in the background. Okay. So that's decentralized investing. By the way, I'm going to take questions at the end, so I think there's mics, and so if you want to line up, I've got plenty of time, but we'll get to that. I want to talk about the next part of this, which is cross-border payments, right? Many of you are familiar with this idea of migrant remittances. It's a massive, massive global business. About $500 billion, probably closer to $1 trillion if you include off-the-books money or money that's remitted using informal channels. Generates probably $75 billion in transaction and foreign exchange revenue for companies like Western Union, MoneyGram, banks, other companies in the space. If you take the model I just described of how to create a synthetic dollar and use that model to move money person to person and eliminate all of the middlemen. There are floors on the fees that those companies have to charge because there's so many hands in the pie when you move the money around. It's amazing how many people touch money, at least logically, when you do a bank wire. So if you create a digital dollar using the model I described 3 slides ago and move that money peer-to-peer and settle effectively in real time, you've eliminated 60% of the hands in the pie. And our research shows that those companies could lower their cost by a minimum of 100 basis points, which, if you know anything about the cost of payments, is an enormous amount of money. So the biggest problem with this is I don't think Western Union would understand what I just said, which is fine. They'll get there, and I know that they're working on trying to understand this stuff. And I'm not picking on them. I think the banks are in the same bucket. But they also didn't understand the internet when I went to talk to them, 20 years ago. So they'll get there. This is incredibly powerful stuff. And the idea that you can hold a dollar on a phone, send it to somebody who receives a peso on a phone with no middleman, with no bank, is counterintuitive, but it's possible today. We have thousands of customers doing this every day at ABRA. Okay? So that's the money transfer application. All right, so we talked about enabling decentralized investing. We talked about cross-border payments. I want to talk to you about the last part of this, and then we'll get into some questions, which is what we call consumer asset finance. It's a very fancy term for borrowing, and the term will make more sense when we get into it. But what is consumer asset finance? All right, so last fall I had the pleasure of spending about a month in Africa, and I visited Kenya and Tanzania, met with the companies who are in this new and growing solar panel business. And these solar panels are for people who've never had electricity in their homes before. This is basically a hut, which is an example of that, a boy doing homework by solar panel light, never had electricity in his life. These solar kits are effectively little boxes with IoT, internet connectivity in them via cellular connectivity. They give these kits away for free. You use your M-Pesa wallet. M-Pesa is a mobile money system which is very popular in Africa. You use your M-Pesa wallet to make a monthly lease payment on the solar kit. If you make your payment, the IoT connection allows the light to go on. If you don't make your payment, the light doesn't go on. You can imagine that the payment rate on these solar lanterns is enormous, right? Amex, one of my investors, would kill for this repayment rate. And they don't get stolen because it's your electricity, okay? So this market is enormous relative to Kenya and Tanzania. Again, weekly, monthly lease payments, uses cellular IoT connectivity, and it's a fantastic way to create a symbiotic relationship between consumer electronics and the consumer. But what about the rest of the planet? What about washing machines, dishwashers, televisions? There are 4 billion people who can't afford the retail cost of traditional electronics. And I'm putting gadgets and other things in that electronics bucket. We also did an analysis on the margins generated in the consumer electronics industry. Outside of Apple, which is in its own kind of unique world, most companies either lose money or run a 10% margin. Now compare that to banks, right? Who in often cases can run 40, 50% return on equity. So how do you take bank margins and make them consumer electronics margins? Well, I just showed you how. The margins on selling a solar lantern at retail are terrible. The margins on leasing that solar lantern are like 75% because the consumer has a monthly fee or a weekly payment they can afford, right? And effectively, the manufacturer is making interest. So I've just showed you a model that takes every consumer electronics company in the world and effectively turns it into a leasing company. We call this instant-on leasing. Right, now, I presented this to Foxconn, the maker of the iPhone, about a year ago. A bunch of folks came over from China and couldn't tell if they understood what I was saying. They went away for a few months, came back, and said, this is incredible. This changes everything. Because if we can build a television in one place, ship it anywhere in the world, right? And by the way, the M-Pesa model won't work everywhere in the world. So you need a payment model that works everywhere in the background that the consumer doesn't have to understand. Well, I described it to you on the money transfer slide. So if they ship that television to Indonesia, and that person can pay in rupees and not actually know that Bitcoin was used to move the money, now all of a sudden it doesn't matter where they ship the television. The payment will automatically work. So they ended up investing in ABRA, and we plan on building out this stack over the next several years. It's very complex, but the consumer won't have to understand it. They'll buy the product using some form of these next generation credit models where they'll look and see, do you have a Facebook account, do you have a mobile phone, et cetera, right? And then you'll make a simple cash payment directly from your smartphone for your television. You make the payment, the TV will work, or the washing machine will work, You don't make the payment, it won't work. So that's consumer asset finance, right? So let me bring this full circle and talk about how this is relating to what ABRA is doing, and then I'm happy to answer some questions. So again, we've built the world's first digital currency wallet that takes advantage of the techniques that I just described to you, meaning that you're holding keys on a phone, right? So if you use an online exchange, they're holding your keys. I would actually claim if you're using an online exchange, you don't actually own cryptocurrency. You own an IOU for cryptocurrency. And every exchange on the planet is being hacked every day. Most of them just don't tell you about it. Okay? So even if you're not using ABRA, please don't leave your stuff online. Right? Get a hardware wallet or get ABRA or do something and get it offline. That's number one. But what ABRA does is we take it one step further. We allow you to hold dozens of currencies, both fiat, Bitcoin, and Ether, and then exchange between them in real time, all using this non-custodial model. And then we go even one step further than that, and we allow you to send those funds to other people who are also using ABRA. So think of that like a global Venmo, right? So if I have a bunch of dollars on my phone, I can buy some Bitcoin, but I can also go to my Bitcoin and send that to a phone number in Mexico, and that person will receive it on their ABRA app as pesos, for example, and then they can do FX on their phone. And then we give you lots of ways to get the money on and off the phone. In the US, you can use your bank accounts. In the Philippines, we're testing a cash teller network of 2,000 locations where you can get the digital currency on and off the phone in exchange for cash. So I hope you got at least this, a little bit of an idea that what's going on here is incredibly powerful and not just driven by speculation into digital currency, right? We want people to actually speculate because the higher the price, the more viable these applications become. But the end game is not the price. The end game is these applications, okay? So with that, I'm happy to take questions, and thanks for listening.
Hi. How do you make money? Thanks.
Yeah. So ABRA makes money on the foreign exchange in the app that I just showed you. So anytime you move between dollars and Bitcoin or dollars and pesos, euros, dollars, whatever, our network partners are setting a price, and ABRA marks that up a small amount and makes money on that spread. It's a little bit like using like TravelX at the airports, right? So you don't actually see a transaction fee, but they're making a little bit of money on the FX spread. We're actually making way less than TravelX, in case you're wondering.
Hello. How do you see the issue of multiple projects having their own tokens for their own application function? You're in the IT background, I'm in an IT company. So projects like SIA coin, let's say, I want to sell it to my customers. They have to buy SIA. They don't know what SIA is. They don't even hardly know what Bitcoin is. There's a lot of great opportunities and projects out there that even the travel guys out here, great application, great opportunity, but they want the travel token. So how do you see that playing out where there's no universal and getting people instantly into those things?
So when I was a 25-year-old kid at Netscape, older people would tell me, you don't understand the way the real world works, right? And I didn't understand, business and blah, 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 right? And I'm a little hesitant to give my real answer because I think younger people are going to say the same thing to me when I give my answer. But look, in 1998, a venture capital Series B was an IPO. That's insane, right? We've gotten to the point now where seed funding is an ICO. Well, in most cases, I'm sorry, but that's equally insane, right? So now that's not to say that there aren't real, unbelievably powerful protocols being created, right? I'm not an expert in all of them, but if you look at like what Orchid's doing or Bancor or EOS, I mean, they haven't proven themselves, but there's promise there. But that's different than using an ICO simply as a replacement for venture capital because you don't know how to raise venture capital. And as somebody who does a lot of angel investing, I know the mathematics of angel investing very well. You have to do between 10 and 15 deals on the angel side a year to make money. Even if you know the tech really well like I do, you're going to lose money on 80% of those deals. So you have to do enough, right, so that the ones that do win make up for the losses. And when I talk to people who are investing in these ICOs, they're not doing 15 to 20 deals a year. So by definition, the math is not going to work. So there's a couple of reasons why I worry a lot about this. Not from the company perspective, because the winners are going to be the winners regardless. There's some really cool stuff going on, and I do think that there's going to be some valuable stuff. But when the 80 to 90% of the other companies go away, which is the same thing that happens in traditional venture, it's going to be a different set of people holding the bag, and that worries me.
All right. We all know that digital transfer, money transfer is the way to go going forward. You know, it's going to be big in next decade. However, there are so many international laws when it comes to the money transfer from one country to other countries, and there are tax implications. And there is a problem of, you know, the money going into the bad people's hand. Can you talk something about this?
Yeah, this is why I started ABRA. This question is exactly why I started ABRA in the first place. ABRA, a better remittance app. So what I wanted to do, and I started a foundation in Haiti after the earthquake, which was using old feature phones to facilitate remittances between Miami and New York and Haiti. And I had to partner with banks all over the place, and it was a nightmare. And then I tried to scale that to many countries, which just made the nightmare grow geometrically. And I said, there has to be a better way. But the better way means you have to get around the banks, because putting licensing in place in 175 countries is untenable for a startup. It's untenable for Citibank. So that led to the idea of the synthetic dollar, which said, okay, let's create a parallel system which allows consumers to hold their own funds. Now, for us, if you've got a lot of money, leaving the money in a bank is perfectly fine. But if you're living hand to mouth, month to month, and you're paying 10% of your income for being a cash consumer, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So putting the power back in the hands of the consumer and allowing them to hold cash on the phone was the breakthrough that actually ended up getting around a lot of this unnecessary regulation. The bank regulation makes perfect sense when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. It makes no sense when you're sending $200 home.
Yeah, so that means your application is going to be suitable for small transactions.
In the short term, it's definitely a consumer-facing, consumer-to-consumer, consumer-to-business-facing application. We do have people in the U.S. who will invest, you know, $100,000 through ABRA. But if they're using their bank account to invest in Bitcoin, they have to provide their personal details, because that's using the banking system. But if you're in the Philippines using ABRA and you're just putting a few hundred pesos, which is a few dollars, on your app using a cash, you know, vendor, there's no KYC involved in that. And there shouldn't have to be, because your risk to the whole financial system is zero, right? And so we definitely have taken advantage of what I would call the regulatory arbitrage capabilities of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is not ready, even at a $200 billion market cap, to scale to business transactions. So even if I wanted to do that, I couldn't do it today, right? There's just not enough Bitcoin to go around to be able to do multi-million-dollar business payments, like GE or Shell. They couldn't use this today for those kind of payments. There's just not enough Bitcoin. But for consumer payments, it's perfect.
So is there any cap on what is the amount you transfer from one country to other country?
Nope. You're literally holding your own money on your phone. It's like taking cash out of your pocket and handing it to the person next to you. And that's the way it should be.
So is it peer-to-peer transfer too?
It's peer-to-peer. So when you're in the app, you can convert between currencies for yourself or send the money to any other ABRA user anywhere in the world based upon their phone number. It's actually doing an on-chain Bitcoin transaction when you do that, but you don't have to understand that as a consumer. For the first time, again, going back to my Netflix analogy, the complexity of that is completely masked to the consumer.
So all the tax implications and other regulations is on the consumers?
That's right. And generally, for peer-to-peer transactions, I meet with central banks all over the world. They acknowledge that they don't regulate consumers holding their own money. That's immoral, right? Even I've yet to meet a country outside of maybe North Korea, who I haven't met, who would say that we regulate consumers holding their own money.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome. Good questions.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm from Colombia, and I try to use ABRA with American Express.
Yeah, it only works in the US right now. Yeah.
How the world works for Latin America in a company like you?
Yeah.
Why we have too many barriers in Colombia?
Yeah. So in addition to running the core wallet, what ABRA is doing in the background, it's building a whole network of cash on and cash off functions in dozens of countries, right? So we started in the US so that you could use your bank account. I mentioned the cash tellers in the Philippines. The goal is to make it completely seamless and transparent to you, like I said, this year in dozens of countries to get money on and off. This is a lot of work. So what ABRA is actually doing in the case of bank accounts, we're partnering with traditional exchanges to facilitate getting the Bitcoin on and off the phone via your bank account. But we just hide the complexity of the exchange by integrating with them in the background, right? So in the case of American Express, after they invested in ABRA, we actually started processing Amex cards directly inside the app, which if you've been reading anything about what's going on in the credit card world, vis-a-vis Bitcoin, that's incredible, right? That they even allowed us to do that. And they, trust me, they dug very deep on what we were doing to make sure that they were comfortable with that. We started with the US with the intention of eventually going to all of the countries supported by Amex, but we just, we recently turned it on, so we're going kind of stepwise through that. But our goal is to be in at least 50 countries this year where you can use your bank account to get money on and off the ABRA app, for sure. It's a high priority for me. Thank you.
It's very admirable what you've done, so thank you so much. I wanted to ask, how are you managing the processing fees if you're doing everything in Bitcoin? How can you do microtransactions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, this has taken up way too much of my time lately. So the transactions that I mentioned are on chain. So we've got some 2.0 stuff that I'm not allowed to talk about coming out in a few weeks that actually addresses that, where we've actually managed to get the mining fees for the smart contracts that we're creating down to near zero. Combination of second layer tech as well as moving between coins via side chains. But when we were first testing this new 2.0 release that we're going to be announcing soon in December, it was a joke. I mean, we were paying at one point $50 transaction fees for $5 transactions, which is obviously not a good business model. So we were actually supposed to release this product here today, and we've actually delayed that a few weeks specifically to fix that. We fixed it now, and it's going to be released in a few weeks. But the beauty for you guys is that when we do release it, the fees are going to be zero. And so what it does is it actually builds on this with a whole bunch of new stuff that I can't talk about yet. But unfortunately, I spent way too much of my time last year fixing that. Thanks.
All right, very good. Let's give you a big hand.
All right.
Bill, fabulous job. That was really interesting. I have one quick question for you that came up multiple times in the online poll, which is, are you dating Gwyneth Paltrow?
No, I'm not dating Gwyneth Paltrow.
Okay,
so,
and
she's
why
engaged.
her?
What's that?
Why her? Apparently she's involved somehow in the company.
Yeah, so the question came up because we did a television show with Apple last summer called Planet of the Apps, and I worked with Gwyneth for about 6 months on the show. And she's an advisor on the marketing side to ABRA. Her company Goop is actually fantastic. And so, we spend a lot of time talking about the marketing of this to consumers. And to your question, she just got engaged. So.
All right, well,
So
there
it's
you
all
go.
good.
Whoever asked that question, let's give him one more hand. All right.